Overwhelming force. $92,000 damage. Yeah, that would do it. A bot with, what was that, 130,000 damage or more? Can't touch these guys. Great. Complete freeze. That's all I need. Macarena crisis.
Gave monastics and refugee Russian universities to all those intelligent, ardent, and loyal in Germany. He took him to the University of Berlin the renowned Fichte, who had just been expelled from Jena by the Duke of Weimar, the friend and protector of Goethe, for advocating atheism. Fichte began his lectures with a fiery speech directed primarily at German youth but published subsequently under the title Addresses to the German Nation 68, in it he predicted very well and clearly the future political greatness of Germany and expressed the proud patriotic conviction that the German nation was predestined to be the highest representative, the ancient. The formation of humanity. To be sure, this was an illusion into which other nations had fallen before Germans, and with greater In fact, at least, a fortunately heroic character. He voiced another the French bass at a time when Berlin was governed by Napoleonic general and French drums sounded in the streets. Moreover, the bold views of scientist philosopher brought to German patriotic pride back. Great humanism, the broad, somewhat atheistic humanism, molded to the great German literature of the 18th century was stamped. But contemporary Germans have retained the vast pretensions of their philosopher Adrian Wall rejected. This humanism. They simply do not understand that they are being prepared to elaborate the general quantitative abstract out of being practical thought. The patriotism of Bismarck or Marx is more intelligible to them. Everyone knows how the Germans finally rose up, taking advantage of Napoleon's total defeat in Russia and his hapless retreat, or, rather, flight with the remnants of his army. Of course, they praise themselves to the skies for this uprising, and completely in vain. There never was any independent popular uprising, strictly speaking. Once Napoleon had been and ceased to be dangerous and fearsome, the German army corps, first the Russians and then the Austrians, which had previously been directed against Russia, now turned against him and joined the victorious Russian army pursuing him. The legitimate but till now hapless Russian King Frederick William III, with tears of emotion and gratitude, embraced his deliverer the Russian Emperor in Berlin and then issued a proclamation summoning his own subjects to legitimate uprising against the illegitimate and imperial Napoleon. Obeying the voice of the king and father, the German, primarily Russian, youth rose up in legions, which were incorporated into the regular army. The Russian began there, alongside, and official rule was not very far on in 1815 he published a pamphlet arousing indignation of all patriots. In it he denied that there had been any independent activity on the part of the people in liberation, stating that the Russian citizens took arms only when the king ordered them to, and that there was nothing heroic in this, nothing extraordinary, merely the fulfillment of any loyal subject's duty. 69. Be that as it may, Germany was liberated from the French yoke, and when the war finally ended it took up the work of internal reform under the supreme leadership of Austria and Prussia. The first step was to unitize the multitude of petty principalities, which were thus transformed from independent states into honorary, with the William France taken from the French, which became then the 5 countries. A total of 39 states and rulers remained in Germany. The second task was to establish mutual relations between the princes and their subjects. During the period of struggle, when Napoleon's sword still hung over everyone and the princes waited and small needed loyal assistance of their people, they had made a number of promises. The Russian government, and all the others after it, promised a constitution. Now that the calamity was past, however, the government was convinced that a constitution was no longer useful. The Austrian government, led by Prince Metternich, bluntly declared its determination to return to the old patriarchal order. The Emperor Francis, 70 who enjoyed enormous popularity among the Viennese burghers, expressed it forthright in an audience he gave to the professors a lot of Lyceum. There is no present for new ideas, he said, which I cannot know never prove. Above my own ideas. Our forebears prospered with them, nor should we not also. I do not mean scholars, only honest and obedient citizens. To educate them is your obligation. He who serves me must teach what I command. Anyone who cannot or will not do this should take himself away, or I will dismiss him. 71. Francis kept his word. In Austria, unlimited arbitrariness reigned until 1848. In the most rigorous fashion, a system of government was introduced whose main objective was to limit the subjects to sleep and turn them into blockheads. Thought slumbered and remained stagnant even in the universities, where instead of knowledge there was rote learning. There was no literature except for crude novels of a scandalous character and very bad poetry. The natural sciences were 50 years behind the rest of Europe. There was no political life. Agriculture, industry, and trade were afflicted with the Chinese immobility. The people, the labor masses, were in total bondage. Had it not been for Italy, and to some degree Hungary, joined the ranks of the great powers only at the end of the previous century, thanks to the genius of Frederica. Great, thanks to Slomza, which she had taken from Austria, and the partitions of Poland, and thanks to the bold liberalism of Bernstein, Scharnhorst, 72 and their associates in Russia's rebirth, as a result of which Russia had taken the lead in Germany's liberation. It seemed that circumstances, recent events, the experiences, successes, and victories, and the very interests of Prussia should have compelled its government to advance boldly along the new path which had proved so fortunate and so salutary for it. That was precisely what Metternich feared so greatly, and ought to have feared. From the time of Frederick the Great, when all the rest of Germany was reduced to the utmost degree of intellectual and moral bondage and was being sacrificed to unceremonious, wasted, and cynical governments, to the intrigues and thievery of corrupt courts, Prussia had realized the ideal of orderly, honest, and, insofar as possible, just administration. Prussia had only one despot, though implacable and fearsome. One, reason of state, or logic of state interest, to which everything else was sacrificed and before which everyone had to bow down. On the other hand, there was much less personal, great arbitrariness in Prussia than in any of the other German states. The Russian subject was the slave of the state, which was personified by the king, but not the king of his court, his mistresses, or his slavers, as in the rest of Germany. Therefore all of Germany already regarded Prussia with particular respect. The respect increased greatly and turned into positive sympathy after 1807. At that time the Prussian state, having been reduced almost to complete extinction, began to seek its salvation and the salvation of Germany in liberal reforms, and after a whole series of felicitous reorganizations the Prussian king called on the whole of Germany as well as his own people to rise up against the French conqueror, while promising to grant his subjects the most strongly liberal constitution upon the conclusion of the war. And it was. He even sent for the fulfillment of his promise, September 1st, 1815. This solemn royal promise was issued on May 22nd, 1815, after Napoleon's return from the island of Elba and before the Battle of Waterloo. It was merely a reiteration of the collective promise that had been made by all the rulers of Europe gathered at the conquest of Vienna, in the ministry and terror news of Napoleon's landing. It was included as one of the most essential points in the statutes of the newly created German Confederation 73. Some of the petty princes of Central and South Germany kept their promise quite honorably. In North Germany, however, where the military, right, and lower government decisively predominated, the older described order was maintained under the direct enforceable protection of Austria. From 1815 to April 1819, the main ministers of Germany overled Russia, in opposition to Austria, or took common aspiration for liberal reforms under its powerful patronage. All the circumstances and the obvious interest of the Prussian government seemed to incline it in this direction. Even apart from Frederick William's solemn promise of May 1815, all the ordeal Prussia had undergone since 1807 and its amazing restoration, which had owed chiefly to the liberalism of its government, should have reinforced this inclination. Finally, there was an even more important consideration impelling the Prussian government to declare itself the open and resolute patron of liberal reforms, the historic rivalry between the young Prussian monarchy and the ancient Austrian Empire. Who would head Germany, Austria, or Russia? That was the question posed by previous events and by long respective positions. Germany, like a slave grown accustomed to obedience, did not know how to live freely and did not wish to do so. It sought a powerful master, a supreme commander to make it completely subordinate itself, who would unite it into an undivided state and give it an honored place among the great powers of Europe. Either the Austrian Emperor or the Prussian king could serve as such a master. Both together could not occupy this position without paralyzing each other and thereby condemning Germany to its former helplessness and powerlessness. Austria would naturally have tried to hold Germany back. It could not have acted otherwise. Austria had reduced to the stage of senile decline and which moved into the any sort of state and removed the necessary condition for maintaining and a threat to Austria. It was dying, and it wanted everyone to die with it. In politics, as in any other aspect of life, to go backwards or merely to remain in one place means death. It is understandable, therefore, that Austria will use its last strength, still formidable in a material sense, to stifle ruthlessly and resolutely all movement in Europe generally and in Germany in particular. Because that was necessarily Austria's policy, Prussia's policy should have been exactly the opposite. After the Napoleonic Wars, after the Congress of Vienna, which significantly rounded out its territory at the expense of Saxony, from which it took an entire province. Especially after the fateful Battle of Waterloo, which was won by the joint armies of Russia under the command of Blucher, and England under the command of Wellington. And after the second triumphal entry of Prussian forces into Paris, Prussia occupied fifth place among the paramount powers of Europe. But in respect to real power, state wealth, population, and even geographical position, it was as yet by no means able to compete with them. Stalin, Danzig, and Königsberg on the Baltic were insufficient for the formation not just of a strong navy but even of a significant merchant marine. Stalin was shifting and separated from its newly acquired Rhineland province. By the possessions of other states, Prussia had extremely inconvenient frontiers from a military point of view, making attacks on it from the direction of South Germany, Hanover, Holland, Belgium, and France very easy and defense very difficult. Finally, its population in 1815 was barely 15 million. Despite this material weakness, which had been much greater under Frederick II, the great team of administrative and military genius succeeded in establishing Prussia's political significance and military power. Napoleon reduced the shield to dust, however. After the Battle of June, everything had to be created anew, and we have seen it on the series of the boldest and most liberal reforms in Napoleon and intelligence state patriots, not merely to restore Russia's former significance and power but considerably to increase them. In fact, they increased them to the degree that Prussia no longer rivalized among the great powers. They were insufficient, however, for Russia to maintain that position for long enough. Continued to determine efforts to enhance its political significance and moral influence, and also to round out and expand its frontiers. To achieve these results, two different paths were open to Russia. One, at least in appearance, was a more popular path, the other carrying a state and military path. Taking the first one, Prussia would have stood all the had the constitution ruled in Germany. Frederick William III, following the great example of the celebrated Union of Orange in 1688, would have been inscribed on the standard for the Protestant faith and liberty of Germany, thus becoming the opponent of Austrian Catholicism and despotism. Taking the second path, having broken his solemn word and categorically renounced any further liberal reforms in Prussia, he would have stood just as openly on the side of reaction in Germany, while concentrating all his attention and efforts on improving his domestic administration and his army with a view to potential conquest in the future. There was yet a third path, taken long ago, in truth, by the ruined Emperor Augustus and his successors, but abandoned after them, rediscovered only in recent times by an opponent free and enlightened and ruthless pupil, Prince Bismarck. That is the path of state, military, and political despotism, camouflaged and embellished with the broadest and most innocuous forms of popular representation. In 1815, however, that path was as yet completely unknown. At that time, no one even suspected the truth which has now become obviously to the most stupid dozens, that so-called constitutional forms, or forms of popular representation, do not include state, military, political, and financial despotism. Instead, they have the effect of legitimizing it and giving it a false appearance of popular government, and they can significantly enhance its internal strength and vigor. No one could then, or indeed could have known it, because the full extent of the bridge between the exploiting class and the exploited. Proletariat was by no means as clear either to the bourgeoisie or to the proletariat itself as it is today. Every government, and the bourgeoisie itself, believed that the people would stand behind the bourgeoisie. The latter had only to bestir itself, to give the sign, and all the people would rise up with it against the government. Now it is a different matter altogether. The bourgeoisie in every European country fears social revolution more than anything else and knows that the state is its only refuge from this threat. Therefore it always wants and demands as strong a state as possible, or, to put it simply, a military dictatorship. To spare its sanity, and also to deceive the masses more easily, it wants that dictatorship to be arrayed in false popular representation, which will enable to exploit the people and people's own needs. In 1815, however, neither the sphere nor this artful policy existed yet in any of the states of Europe. On the contrary, the bourgeoisie everywhere was completely annihilated at all. It still believed in working for itself, worked for everyone, and therefore it was not afraid of the people, it was not afraid of inciting them against the government. Hence, all governments, relying as much as possible on the only, regarded the bourgeoisie with hostility as a revolutionary class. There is no doubt that in 1815, or even much later, if Russia had made the slightest declaration of liberalism, if the Russian king had rendered such as even a shadow of a bourgeois constitution, it would have been enough for the whole of Germany to recognize him as its leader. The non-Russian Germans had not yet conceived the sole antipathy for Russia that manifested itself much later, especially in 1848. On the contrary, all the Germanic countries looked to it with hope, expecting from it the word of liberation. Just half of the liberal and representative institutions which the Prussian government recently bestowed so generously not just on the Prussians but on all the non-Prussian Germans except the Austrians, without any detriment to its despotic power. However, what has sufficed for the whole of non-Austrian Germany, at least, to recognize Russia's hegemony. That was precisely what Austria feared so much, because it would have been enough to put it right then and there in the unfortunate and helpless position in which it finds itself today. Had it lost its position of primacy in the German Confederation, it would have ceased to be a German power. We have seen that Germany made up only 1/4 of the population of the Austrian Empire. As only Austria's German provinces, as well as certain of its Slavic provinces, such as Bohemia, Moravia, Galicia, and Styria, taken together form one of the members of the German Confederation. The Austrian Germans, relying on the numerous inhabitants of Germany, could have certainly few regard their own empire as a German law. Once the empire had been detached from the German Confederation, however, as it has been known, its primary influence, at that time even used, would have proved too late to maintain their historical dominance. The Austrian Germans would have had no choice but to renounce their allegiance to the House of Habsburg and unite with the rest of Germany. That is exactly what they are aiming to do now, some consciously, others unconsciously, thereby condemning the Austrian Empire to imminent death. Once Prussian hegemony within Germany had been confirmed, the Austrian government would have been compelled to remove its German provinces from inclusion in the Confederation. In the first place, leaving them in the Confederation would in effect have meant subordinating them, and through them the Austrian government itself to the suzerainty of the King of Russia. Secondly, the Austrian Empire in such case would have been divided into two parts, one German, recognizing Prussian hegemony, the other not recognizing it, and that would also have been fatal to the empire. True, there was another method, which Prince Schwarzenberg wanted to try in 1815, but did not succeed, and indeed could not have succeeded, in doing so, to include the German Confederation before the Austrian Empire, with Hungary, Transylvania, and all the Slavic and Italian provinces. This attempt could not have succeeded because it would have been resisted desperately by Russia and most of the rest of Germany long, as it was in 1815, semi-foreign by all the other great powers, especially Russia and France. Finally, it would have aroused the indignation of 3/4 of the Austrian population that hated the Germans, Slavs, Magyars, Romanians, and Italians, to believe their idea of the German Transylvanians. Russia and the whole German would naturally have opposed such an attack, the organization of which would have destroyed the whole and deprived it of its special German character. As for the latter, Germany would have ceased to be the fatherland of the Germans and become a conglomeration of the most heterogeneous nationalities, chaotic and held together by force. Russia and France would not have consented because Austria, with the rest of Germany now subordinated to it, would suddenly have become the mightiest power of the European continent. Therefore Austria had only one recourse, not to smother Germany by joining it entirely, but at the same time not to allow Russia to become the leader of the German Confederation. In pursuing this policy, Austria could count on the active assistance of France and Russia. The latter as policy until very recently, that is, until the coming war, consisted of systematically encouraging the mutual rivalry between Austria and Russia so that neither one might prevail over the other, while at the same time provoking mistrust and fear in small and medium-sized states of Germany and protecting them against Austria and Russia. Russia's influence on the rest of Germany was chiefly of a moral nature, based primarily on the expectation that the Russian government, which not long ago had given so much proof of its patriotic and liberal orientation, would soon keep its promise and grant its subjects a constitution, with the condescending leadership of the progressive movement throughout Germany. Medich's chief concern, therefore, was to keep the Russian king from granting its subjects a constitution while waiting to join the Austrian emperor in assuming leadership of the reactionary movement in Germany. He found very enthusiastic support for this endeavor both in France, which was ruled by the Britons, and in Emperor Alexander I, who was ruled by Russia 75. Metternich found equally enthusiastic support within Russia itself, from, with very minor exceptions, the entire Prussian nobility, the upper bureaucracy, military as well as civil, and, finally, from the king. Frederick William III was a very nice man, but he was a king, a moral and truly a king, a despot by nature, upbringing, and habit. Furthermore, he was a devout and faithful son of the evangelical church, the Cardinal Dogma, of which that all power is of God. He sincerely believed in his divine anointment, in his right, or, rather, his duty, to command, and in the obligation of each of his subjects to obey his orders and execute them without question. Such a cast of mind was incompatible with liberalism. To be sure, when misfortune struck the state, he made a number of very little promises to his faithful subjects. He did so, however, in obedience to state necessity, to which even the sovereign must pay homage as the highest law. Now the crisis had passed, many of the promises, which would have been fruitful to the people themselves if they were fulfilled, did not have to be kept. Richelieu very explained it very well in a contemporary sermon. The king, he said, has acted like a wise father. On his birthday when he recovered from an illness, touched by the love of his children, he made them all sorts of promises. Then, with appropriate serenity, he modified them and restored his ritual and salutary glory. 76 around him. The entire court, the military chiefs, and the upper bureaucracy were imbued with the same spirit. During the period of misfortune which they had brought down on Russia, they kept quiet, suffering in silence the unavoidable reforms of Berenstein and his principal associates. Now they began to retreat and to make more trouble than ever. They were sensing reactionaries, noticing the king himself, perhaps even more. Germany was becoming something they not only did not understand but hated with all their hearts. The German flag was repugnant to them and seemed the flag of revolt. All they knew was their dear Russia, which, however, they were prepared to win once again only to avoid making the least concession to the hated liberals. The idea of recognizing any political rights over the bourgeoisie, especially the rights of citizenship and financial control, the idea of possible equality with them, simply horrified them and made them indescribably indignant. They wanted to extend and round out Russia's frontiers, but only by means of conquest. From the very beginning their objective was clear. In contrast to the Liberal Party, which strove to Germanize Russia, they wanted to Russify Germany. Moreover, beginning a little later, the kings from Prince Wolfenstein, who soon became Prime Minister, almost all of them were in the field Metternich 77 against them instead of a small group of men, friends and associates of Berenstein, who had already been dismissed. This handful of state patriots continued to make incredible efforts to keep the king on the path of liberal reforms. Finding no support anywhere except in public opinion, which was scorned equally by the king, the court, the bureaucracy, and the army, they were soon overthrown. Metternich's bold and reactionary orientation of the highest circles in Germany proved much stronger. To implement purely liberal plans, therefore, only one course remained open to Russia, to refine and gradually augment its administrative and financial resources, as well as its military power, with a view to future annexations within Germany, that is, the gradual conquest of Germany as a whole. This course, moreover, conformed fully to the traditions and the very character of the Russian monarchy, which was a military, bureaucratic, police regime, in other words, a state exercising realized force in all of its external and domestic actions. From that time, the idea of rational and human despotism began to form in German official circles, and it governed Russia until 1848. It was as contrary to the literal aspirations of pan-German patriotism as managed to despotic despotism. Quite naturally, a struggle by liberal patriotic party against the reaction which found powerful expression in the domestic and foreign policies of Austria and Russia arose more or less throughout Germany, but primarily in the south. It was a duel of swords, which lasted exactly 55 years, from 1815 to 1870. It took various forms, but with results that were almost always identical and always highly lamentable for the German liberals. It can be divided into several periods. 1. The period of liberalism and Francophobia of the Teutonic Romantics, from 1815 to 1830. 2. The period of overt imitation of French liberalism, from 1830 to 1840. 3. The period of economic liberalism and radicalism, from 1840 to 1848. 4. The period, albeit very brief, of decisive crisis, from 1848 to 1850, ending with the death of German liberalism. And lastly, 5. The period from 1850 to 1870, which began with the Stadtland, it can be said, final struggle of dying liberalism against statism and the Russian parliament, and with the definitive triumph of the Russian monarchy throughout Germany. German liberalism of the first period, from 1815 to 1830, was not an isolated phenomenon. It was only a national, though highly distinctive, offshoot of European liberalism, which almost everywhere, from Madrid to Petersburg and from Vienna to Greece, began a very energetic struggle against pan-European monarchical and aristocratic clerical reaction. The latter had triumphed for the restoration of the rulers to the thrones of France, Spain, Naples, Parma, and Lucca, the return of the Pope and the Jesuits to Rome and Piedmontese king to Turin, and the establishment of the Austrians in Italy. The principal and official representative of this truly international reaction was the Holy Alliance, La Sainte Alliance, first concluded by Russia, Prussia, and Austria, but later adhered to by all the European powers, great and small, except for England, Rome, and Turkey. It had its origins in Romanticism. The idea first ripened in the mystical imagination of the celebrated Baroness Grüner, who enjoyed the favors of the womanizing Alexandrine, still quite young and not entirely past his prime 78. She convinced him that he was one angel sent down from heaven to save an happy era from the clutches of the Black Angel, Napoleon, and to establish God's order on earth. Alexander readily came to believe in his mission and proposed to Russia and Austria the conclusion of the Holy Alliance. The three divinely anointed monarchs, appropriately invoking the Holy Trinity as witnesses, pledged their unconditional and indissoluble brotherhood and proclaimed as the objective of the alliance the triumph of God's will, morality, justice, and peace on earth. They promised always to act in concert, assisting each other in council and aiding any struggle that might be incited against them by the spirit of darkness, meaning the desire of nations for liberty. In actuality, this promise meant that they would wish to rectify and cleanse war on all manifestations of liberalism in Europe, supporting to the end and at any cost the feudal institutions of reform and destroy the revolution that would be established by the Restoration. If Alexander was the bombastic and melodramatic spokesman for the Holy Alliance, its real leader was Metternich. Germany at that time was the cornerstone of European reaction, as it had been during the Great Revolution and as it is today. Thanks to the Holy Alliance, reaction was internationalized, and, in consequence, uprisings against it also took on an international character. The the period from 1815 to 1830 was the last heroic period of the bourgeoisie in Western Europe. The forcible restoration of monarchical absolutism and feudal clerical institutions, which deprived this respectable class of all the benefits it had won during the Revolution, naturally had the effect of turning it once again into a more or less revolutionary class. In France, Italy, Spain, Belgium, and Germany, bourgeois secret societies were formed with the objective of overthrowing the order that had just triumphed. In England, in accordance with the customs of that country, the only war institutionalism had foot. Down deep and bottom roots, the ubiquitous struggle of bourgeois liberalism against resurrected feudalism assumed the character of legal agitation and parliamentary upheavals. In France, Belgium, Italy, and Spain it was obliged to take a decidedly revolutionary turn, which was echoed in Russia and Poland. In all these countries, each secret society uncovered the disorder that the government was immediately replaced by another, and all had a similar objective: armed insurrection, the organization of an uprising. The entire history of France from 1815 to 1830 was a series of attempts to topple the Bourbon throne, and after a number of failures the French finally achieved their goal in 1830. Everyone knows the history of the Spanish, Neapolitan, Piedmontese, Belgian, and Polish revolutions of 1830-31, and the Decembrist uprising in Russia. In all these countries, with success in some, without success in others, the insurrections were extremely serious. A great deal of blood was shed, a great many precious sacrifices were exacted. In short, it was a great and often heroic struggle. Now let us take a look at what was happening in Germany at the time. Throughout this first period we encounter only two expressions of liberal spirit in Germany that are at all noteworthy. The first was the famous Wartburg Gathering of 1817. At Wartburg Castle, which had once served as the secret refuge of Luther, some 500 students gathered from all parts of Germany bearing the tricolor German national FLAGC and with the tricolor sashes across their chests. They were the spiritual children of art, the patriotic professor and bard who composed the famous national anthem, Was das Deutschland. Adolfson, the equally patriotic father of all German gymnasts, who in the full word fresh, joyful, cognate, free expressed the ideal of the one, longer German youth 79 students from North and South Germany found it necessary to come together and declare loudly to the whole Europe, and especially to all the government of Germany, the demands of the German people. What exactly were they declaring and demanding? Throughout Europe at that time, constitutional monarchy was in fashion. The imaginations of the bourgeois youth of France, Spain, Poland, and even Italy went no further than that. Only in Russia, the branch of the Decembrists known as the Second Society under the leadership of Pistol and Morale of Apostol, demanded the destruction of the Russian Empire and the establishment of the Slavic Federal Republic with all land to be distributed to the people. The Germans had no such thought. They did not want to destroy anything. They had as little inclination that as they do now for an act of that kind, the primary and indispensable condition for any serious revolution. They did not even dream of raising a seditious, sacrilegious hand against any of their numerous smaller sovereigns. All they wanted, all they asked, was that each of those father sovereigns grant a constitution of some kind. In addition, they wanted all German parliaments set up local parliaments, and all German emperors set up local princes as the representative of national unity. It was an extremely moderate demand, as we see, and also highly ridiculous. They wanted a monarchical federation and at the same time bring to the power of a unified German state, a pattern of absurdity. One may only subject the German program to closer scrutiny, however, to become convinced that the seeming absurdity stems from a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding is the mistaken assumption that the Germans, in addition to national power and unity, also demanded liberty. The Germans have never needed liberty. To them life is simply inconceivable without government, that is, without a supreme one-sided and iron hand to order them about. The stronger the hand, the prouder they are, the more cheerful life becomes for them. What distressed them was not the absence of liberty, which they could not have made use of, but the absence of a unified and individual national power instead of that. multitude of petty tyrannies. Their secret passion, their sole objective, was to create a huge, pan-German, all-devouring state before which all other nations would tremble. Therefore, it is perfectly natural that they never wanted a popular revolution. In this respect, the Germans proved eminently logical. State power cannot in fact be the cause of the popular revolution. It perhaps be the cause of the later being of a certain class of a popular uprising, as it was in France. Even in France, however, the final construction of a strong state required the strong and despotic hand of Napoleon. The German world hated Napoleon's despotism, but they were prepared to worship state power, Christian or Austrian, as long as it would become pan-German power. Once famous law was Das Deutsche Elend, which to this day has remained the national anthem of Germany, only expresses the passionate desire to create a powerful state. Elend, where is the German fatherland? Prussia? Austria? North or South? Germany? Western or Eastern Germany? Then it answers, no, his fatherland must be much broader. It extends everywhere, wherever the German language is heard and sings to God in heaven. Since the Germans are one of the most prolific nations in the world and send out colonies everywhere, filling all the capitals of Europe, America, and even Siberia, so the entire world will have to submit to the authority of the pan-German emperor. That was the real significance of the Wartburg Student Gathering. They saw the demanded pan-German master who would rule them with iron hand, and on the strength of their passionate and voluntary submission would make all of Europe tremble. Now let us see how they declared their discontent. At the Wartburg Festival they first sang Luther as famous hymn, A Mighty Fortress is Our God, then was Das Deutsche Elend. They shouted the effect to some German patriots and first reactionaries. Finally, they made all fires of the reactionary emperors. That was all. Of greater significance were two other events that occurred in 1819, the assassination of the Russian spy Kosty Vyaztin, Stan, and the attempted assassination of a petty state dignitary with the Duchy of Nassau-Weimar by the young pharmacist, Karl von Meyer. Those facts were thoroughly ridiculous, since they could have brought no benefit whatsoever. But at least they manifested the sincere passion, the heroism of self-sacrifice, and the unity of thought, word, and deed without which revolutionism inevitably degenerates into rhetoric and becomes a disgusting lie. Except for those two events, none of the other expressions of German liberalism went beyond the realm of the most naive and highly ludicrous rhetoric. It was a purely walk-toy Teutonism. The German students, children of Philistines and future Philistines themselves, fancied themselves Germans of ancient times as described by Tacitus and Julius Caesar. Warlike descendants of Arminius, innocent inhabitants of the dim forests. As a result, they conceived their grounds for and looked for their own petty bourgeois world, as logic would have demanded, but for the French, in general, for anything that would mark the French civilization. Francophobia became an epidemic disease in Germany. The university students began to dress up in ancient German garb, just like their Slavophils in the 1840s and 1850s, and French youth were all over the uniformities of the year, while displaying their war and incessant movements, which usually ended with facial scars. Patriotism and civil liberalism found their fullest expression and satisfaction in bellowing militant and patriotic songs with the national anthem, whereas the German fatherland. The propagated to the pan-German are now achieved, or in the process of being achieved, have of course all times had a place. Anyone who compares these expressions of liberalism with what was occurring at the time in England, Spain, France, Belgium, Poland, Russia, and Greece will agree that there was nothing more naive and ridiculous than German liberalism. Its most vehement manifestation permeated with that doltish sense of obedience and loyalty to the sovereign, or, to put it more politely, that pious reverence for power and authority, the spectacle of which wrenched from born the painful exclamation, "It is well known and we have cited it elsewhere, other nations are often slaves, but the Germans are always Vikings." Date 1. In fact, German liberalism, except for a very small number of individuals and cases, was merely an essential form of German laicism, of nationwide ambition to be like it. It was merely an expression, disapproved by the censorship of the general desire for a firm imperial hand. But this demand on the part of loyal subjects seemed an insurrection to the various governments, and they persecuted it like an insurrection. The explanation lies in the rivalry between Austria and Prussia. Each would gladly have seated itself on the abolished throne of Golgotha, but neither could consent to that throne being occupied by its rival. As a result, supported simultaneously by Russia and France and acting in concert with them, though for entirely different reasons, Austria and Russia began to persecute as manifestation of the most extreme liberalism and common desire of all the Germans for the creation of a unified and powerful pan-German empire. Costly's assassination was the signal for the most ferocious reaction. German princes and ministers began to hold meetings and conferences, and there were international congresses in which Alexander I and the French envoy took part. A series of measures prescribed by the German Confederation bound the poor German liberal lackeys hand and foot. They were forbidden to engage in gymnastic exercises or sing patriotic songs. All they had left was beer. Censorship was established everywhere, and what was the result? Germany suddenly grew calm. The Burschenschaft submitted without a word of protest, and in the 11 years from 1819 to 1830 there was not the slightest manifestation of political life anywhere on German soil. This fact is so striking that the German professor Muller, who wrote a fairly detailed and truthful history of the 50 years from 1816 to 1865, in recounting the circumstances of the sudden and truly marvelous pacification, explains, is any further proof needed that there was no basis for revolution in Germany? 82. The second period of German liberalism began in 1830 and ended around 1840. It was a period almost like imitation of the French. The Germans stopped beating the Gauls and instead turned all their hatred against Russia. German liberalism walked from its slightly loosely not of its own accord but as a result of the 3 June days in Paris, which delivered the first blood to the Holy Alliance. By driving out the legitimate King 83 revolution that employed the Belgian and Poland gave all the rise to Southside, betrayed to the Austrians by Louis Philippe, was subject to an even KO. In Spain, a civil war broke out between the Christianists and the Communists,
Yeah.
Its awakening was made easier by the fact that the July Revolution scared all the German governments to death, including those of Austria and Prussia. Until the advent of Bismarck, with his king emperor on the German throne, all the German governments, despite their external appearance of military, political, and bourgeois strength, morally were very weak and lacked confidence in themselves. That undeniable fact seems very strange in view of the German people's innate sentiments of affection and loyalty. Would have made the governments anxious and frightened. They sensed, they knew, that though the Germans obeyed their governments as good subjects should, they could not divide them. What had they done to arouse the hatred of a people so disposed to worship its rulers? What were the reasons for that hatred? There were 2. The first was the predominance of the noble element in bureaucracy and authority. The July Revolution abolished the vestiges of feudal and clerical domination in France. In the 2, bourgeois liberal reform triumphed after the July Revolution 85 in general, 18 grew more the beginning of the complete triumph of the bourgeoisie in Europe, except in Germany. There, and until very recently, that is, and until the transformation of the aristocrat of the war, the feudal party continued to reign. All the highest government posts and the large share of lords, both in bureaucracy and in the army, were resents. Everyone knows how contemptuously, how haughtily German aristocrats, princes, counts, barons, and even their bias treat a burgher. According to the famous dictum of Prince Wendischwitz, 86 the Austrian general Marshal Prague in 1848 and Vienna in 1849, human beings are only exhibits. The nobility's predominance was all the more offensive to German burghers in that the nobility in every respect, in health as well as in intellectual development, is incomparably inferior to the bourgeois class. Nevertheless, it commanded everyone and everywhere. The burghers were granted only the right to gain the way. That was exceedingly disagreeable to them. Despite their readiness to worship their legitimate sovereigns, they could not abide governments that were almost exclusively in the hands of the nobility. It is remarkable times they tried but were unable to throw off the nobility's yoke. It even survived the stormy years of 1848 and 1849 and is only now beginning to undergo systematic destruction at the hands of the Pomeranian nobleman, Prince Bismarck. We have already explained the second and primitive reason for the Germans' antipathy for their governments. The latter were opposed to Germany's unification into a strong state, thus they offended all bourgeois liberal instincts of the German people. The governments knew and therefore disgusted their subjects. They were truly afraid of them, despite their subjects' constant efforts to demonstrate the boundless obedience, their hierarchies. As a result of these misunderstandings, the governments very much feared the consequences of the July Revolution. They feared them so much that the most harmless and bloodless riot in the streets, a putsch, as the Germans call it, was enough to impel the kings of Saxony and Hanover and the dukes of Hesse-Darmstadt and Brunswick to grant their subjects the Constitution. Moreover, Prussia and Austria, even Metternich himself, hitherto the soul of reaction throughout Germany, now advised the German Confederation not to oppose the legitimate demands of their loyal subjects. In the Parliament of South Germany, the leaders of the so-called Liberal Party began to speak very loudly of renewing their demands for an all-German parliament and the election of an all-German emperor. Everything hinged on the outcome of the Polish Revolution. Had it triumphed, the Prussian monarchy, torn from its northeastern roots and forced to make restitution of at least a considerable part, if not all, of its Polish provinces, would have had to seek a new point of support in Germany itself. Since it could not have done so only to the East, it would have had plenty indulgence and left the rest of Germany by means of liberal rewards, boldly rallying all the Germans under the imperial flag. In short, what has been done and what has been accomplished then, though by different methods, and perhaps what has been accomplished from the start in more liberal points. Instead of Prussia's falling in Germany, as it is today, Germany would have seemed to be falling in Prussia. It would only have seemed to do so, however, because in fact Germany would still have been enslaved by the power of Prussia's state organization. The Poles, however, were betrayed and abandoned by all Europe and were finally defeated despite their heroic resistance. Warsaw fell, and with it all hopes of German patriotism. King Frederick William III, who had rendered such significant services to his son-in-law, Emperor Nicholas, was emboldened by the latter's victory to throw off his mask and begin persecuting the pan-German patriots more than ever. The latter, rallying all their forces, then made a final solemn declaration, if not a powerful one then at least a very noisy one, preserved in modern German history under the name of the Hambach Festival of May 1832. At Hambach, in Bavarian Palatinate, some 30,000 men and women gathered on this occasion. The men wore tricolor sashes across their chests, the women tricolor skirts, all of them, of course, standing. The tricolor German flags. What was spoken of at this meeting was no longer Federation of Germanic lands and Germanic peoples but pan-German centralization. Some of the orders, such as Dr. Werth, 87 referred to the German Republic and even the European Federal Republic, the United States of Europe. These were only words, however, words of anger, spite, and despair aroused in German hearts by the manifest unwillingness or inability of the German princes to create a pan-German empire. They were very eloquent words but were backed neither by will nor by organization and therefore had no force. The Hambach meeting did not pass without leaving a trace, however. The peasants of the Bavarian Palatinate did not content themselves with words. Armed with scythes and pitchforks, they proceeded to destroy the castles of the nobility, the custom houses, and government offices, consigning all documents to the flames, refusing to pay taxes, and demanding land for themselves and complete freedom on the land. This peasant rebellion, in its origins very similar to the general uprising of the German peasants in 1525, terribly frightened not only the conservatives but even the liberals and the republicans, whose bourgeois liberalism is in no way compatible with a real popular uprising. To the satisfaction of all, this renewed attempt at a peasant insurrection was put down by Bavarian troops. Another consequence of the Hambach Festival was an attack by 70 armed students on the main sentry post guarding the building of the German Confederation in Frankfurt. It was a ridiculous enterprise but a very bold one, and from that point of view worthy of respect. It was ridiculous because the German Confederation had to be fought not in Frankfurt but in Berlin or Vienna, and because 70 students were hardly sufficient to break the power of reaction in Germany. True, they hoped that the whole population of Frankfurt would rise up behind them and with them, not suspecting that the government had been warned several days beforehand of this senseless attempt. The government did not feel it necessary to forestall it, however, but allowed it to be carried out so as to have a good pretext for finally annihilating revolutionaries and revolutionary aspirations in Germany. The fiercest reaction did in fact ensue in all the countries of Germany in the wake of the Frankfurt incident. In Frankfurt, a central commission was set up, under the direction of which special commissions operated in all the big and small states. Austrian and Prussian state inquisitors, of course, sat on the central commission. It was a veritable festival for the officials and paper factories of Germany, for an immeasurable quantity of paper was consumed. More than 1,800 people were arrested throughout Germany, including a number of respectable individuals, such as professors, doctors, and lawyers, the whole flower of liberal Germany. Many fled, but many remained imprisoned until 1840, some until 1848. We saw a considerable number of these. Desperate liberals in March 1848 in the Parliament and then in the National Assembly 88, without exception they all turned out to be desperate reactionaries. All political movement came to an end in Germany with the Hamburg Festival, the peasant uprising in the Palatinate, and the Frankfurt incident and the huge trial that followed it. A stillness of the grey descended, lasting without the slightest interruption right up to 1848. Literary movement took the place of political movement. As we have already said, in contrast to the first period of German liberalism, 1815-30, a period of frenzied Francophobia, the second period, 1830-40, as well as the third, to 1848, can be called purely French, at least in respect to belles lettres and political literature. Heading this new orientation were two Jews, one a poet of genius, Heine, the other the remarkable pamphleteer, Born. Both moved to Paris almost in the first days of the July Revolution, and from there they began to advocate French theories, French institutions, and Parisian life to the Germans, the first in his poems, the second in his letters from Paris 89. It can be said that they effected a revolution in German literature. Bookstores and libraries overflowed with translations and poor imitations of French plays, melodramas, comedies, stories, and novels. The bourgeois youth began to think, feel, talk, dress, and comb their hair in the French manner. That did not make them any more refined, however, just more ridiculous. And that is, the Territorial Reserve and the Home Guard. Be the text as Francis Joseph, who came to the throne in 1848. See black, red, and gold. Delaquism is voluntary slavery. A strange thing. It would seem that no slavery could be worse than that of the Russians. Among Russian students, however, there has never existed such a servile attitude toward professors and the authorities as exists to this day among all the German students. University students. At the same time another orientation was taking root in Berlin, one more serious, more firmly grounded, and incomparably more characteristic of the German spirit. As often happens in history, Hegel's death, which occurred shortly after the July Revolution, confirmed the domination of his metaphysical thought, the reign of Hegelianism, in Berlin, in Prussia, and then throughout Germany. Prussia, at least for the time being and for the reasons set forth above, had renounced the unification of Germany by means of liberal reforms. It could not and would not, however, completely renounce moral and material hegemony over all the other German states and lands. On the contrary, it constantly strove to become the intellectual and economic focal point of all Germany. To this end it employed two methods, the development of the University of Berlin and the Customs Union. In the last years of the reign of Frederick William III, the Minister of Culture was Privy Councillor von Altenstein, a statesman of the old liberal school of Bernstein, Wilhelm von Humboldt, and the others 90 in opposition to all of his ministerial callings and to Metternich, who, by systematically extinguishing all intellectual light, hoped to consolidate the reign of reaction in Austria and throughout Germany. Altenstein remained true to the old liberal traditions insofar as it was possible in that reactionary period. He he tried to gather all the progressive figures, all the luminaries of German scholarship, at the University of Berlin. Thus, at the very time that the Prussian government, in concert with Metternich and encouraged by Emperor Nicholas, was sparing no effort to stifle liberalism and the liberals, Berlin became the center, the brilliant focal point, of the scientific and spiritual life of Germany. Hegel, whom the Prussian government had invited in 1818 to occupy Fich's chair, died at the end of 1831. But he left behind him at the universities of Berlin, Königsberg, and Halle a whole school of young professors, editors of his works, and ardent adherents and interpreters of his doctrines. Thanks to their tireless efforts, those doctrines were rapidly disseminated not only throughout Germany but in many other European countries, even in France, where they were introduced in thoroughly mutilated form by Victor Cousin 91. They attracted a multitude of German and non-German intellects to Berlin as to a vital source of new light, not to say a new revelation. Unless you lived in those times, you will never understand how powerful the fascination of this philosophical system was in the 1830s and 1840s. It was believed that the eternally sought absolute had finally been found and understood, and that it could be bought wholesale or retail in Berlin. In the history of the development of human thought, Hegel's philosophy was in fact a significant phenomenon. It was the last and definitive word of the pantheistic and abstractly humanistic movement of the German spirit, which began with the works of Lessing and achieved comprehensive development in the works of Goethe. This movement created a world that was infinitely broad, rich, lofty, and ostensibly perfectly rational, but that remained as alien to earthly life and reality as it was to the heaven of Christian theology. As a result, this world, like Fata Morgana, neither reaching heaven nor touching the earth but suspended between them, turned the life of its adherents, its introspective and poetizing inhabitants, into an uninterrupted series of somnambulistic ideas and experiences. It rendered them totally unfit for life, or, even worse, condemned them to do in the real world exactly the opposite of what they worshipped in their poetic or metaphysical ideal. This explains the amazing and quite common phenomenon that is still so striking in Germany today, that the fervent adherents of Lessing, Schiller, Goethe, Kant, Fichte, and Hegel could, and still can, serve as obedient and even willing agents of the inhumane and illiberal measures prescribed by their governments. It can even be said that in general the more elevated a German's ideal world, the uglier and more vulgar his life and actions in the real world. Hegel's philosophy was the consummation of this world of lofty ideals. It fully expressed and explained this world in its metaphysical constructs and categories, and thereby destroyed it, attaining, by means of iron logic, complete awareness of it and of its own infinite groundlessness, unreality, and, to put it more simply, emptiness. Hegel's school, as is well known, divided into two opposing parties. Naturally, a third, middle party formed between them, which is not worth mentioning here. One of them, the Conservative Party, found in the new philosophy the justification and legitimization of everything that exists, seizing upon Hegel's famous dictum, all that is real is rational. This party created the so-called official philosophy of the Prussian monarchy, which had been upheld by Hegel himself as the ideal political organization. The other party, the so-called revolutionary Hegelians, proved more consistent than Hegel himself, and incomparably bolder. It tore away the conservative mask from his doctrines and revealed in all its nakedness the merciless negation that constitutes their essence. At the head of this party stood the illustrious Feuerbach, who pressed logical consistency not only to the utter negation of the whole divine world but to the negation of metaphysics itself. He could go no further. A metaphysician himself, he was obliged to yield his place to his legitimate heirs, the representatives of the school of materialists, or realists, most of whom, however, such as Buchner, 92 Marx, and others, could not and cannot free themselves from the sway of abstract, metaphysical thought. In the 1830s and 1840s the prevailing opinion was that a revolution which followed the dissemination of a Hegelianism developed in the direction of utter negation would be incomparably more radical, profound, merciless, and sweeping in its destructiveness than the revolution of 1793. That was because the philosophy worked out by Hegel and taken to its most extreme conclusions by his students was actually more complete, more comprehensive, and more profound than the thinking of Voltaire and Rousseau. They, as is well known, had a direct and not always beneficial influence on the development and particularly the outcome of the First French Revolution. It is undeniable, for example, that the admirers of Voltaire, who had instinctive contempt for the masses, the stupid crowd, were statesmen like Mirabeau, and that the most fanatical adherent of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Maximilien Robespierre, re-established divine and reactionary civic rights in France. In the 1830s and 1840s it was assumed that when the time for revolutionary action came again, the doctors of philosophy of the school of Hegel would leave the boldest figures of the 1790s far behind them and would amaze the world with their rigorously logical and relentless revolutionism. The poet Heine wrote many eloquent words on the subject. "All your revolutions are as nothing," he said to the French, "compared to our future German revolution. We, who had the audacity to destroy the entire divine world in a systematic, scientific fashion, will not hesitate before any idols on earth and will not rest until, on the ruins of privilege and power, we have won total equality and total liberty for the entire world." In much the same terms Heine proclaimed to the French the future marvels of the German Revolution. And many people believed him. Alas, the experience of 1848 and 1849 was enough to shatter that belief. Not only did the German revolutionaries not outdo the heroes of the First French Revolution, they could not even compare with the French revolutionaries of the 1830s. What was the reason for this lamentable bankruptcy? The explanation lies chiefly, of course, in the special historical character of the Germans, which disposes them much more to loyal obedience than to rebellion, but it lies also in the abstract method by which they approached revolution. Again, in conformity with their nature, they proceeded not from life to thought but from thought to life. But anyone who takes abstract thought as a starting point will never make it to life, for there is no road leading from metaphysics to life. Another separates them. No one has yet succeeded, nor will anyone ever succeed, in jumping across it, in making a salto mortale, or what Hegel himself called a qualitatively qualitative resprung, from the world of logic to the world of nature, of living reality. Anyone who relies on abstraction will die in it. The living, concretely rational method of science is to proceed from the real fact to the idea that encompasses it, expresses it, and thereby explains it. In the practical world it is a movement from social life to the most rational possible organization of it, in accordance with the specifications, conditions, needs, and more or less passionate demands of social life itself. That is the broad popular method, the method of real and total liberation, accessible to anyone and therefore truly popular. It is the method of the anarchist social revolution, which arises spontaneously within the people and destroys everything that opposes the broad flow of popular life so as to create new forms of free social organization out of the very depths of the people's existence. The metaphysicians' method is entirely different. By metaphysicians they mean not just the followers of Hegel's doctrines, few of whom are left in the world, but also positivists and in general all the present-day worshippers of the god of science. All those who by one means or another, if only by a very diligent but necessarily always imperfect study of the past and present, have created for themselves an ideal social organization into which, like new Procrustes, they want to force the life of future generations whatever the cost. In short, all those who, instead of regarding thought or science as one of the necessary manifestations of natural and social life, take such a narrow view of that poor life that they see in it only the practical manifestation of their own thought and their own always imperfect science. Metaphysicians or positivists, all these knights of science and thought, in the name of which they consider themselves ordained to prescribe the laws of life, are reactionaries, conscious or unconscious. This is very easy to prove. We are not speaking of metaphysics in general, with which only a few individuals occupied themselves even in those periods when it flourished most brilliantly. Even today, science in the broad sense of the term, serious science that is at all worthy of the name, is accessible only to a very insignificant minority. For example, out of 80 million inhabitants of Russia, how many serious scholars do we have? People who talk about science may number in the thousands, but there are barely a few truly knowledgeable about it. If science is to prescribe the laws of life, however, then the great majority of mankind, millions of people, must be governed by 1 or 200 scholars. In fact, the number is much smaller, for it is not just any science that renders an individual capable of governing society but the science of sciences, the crown of all the sciences, sociology, which presumes in the fortunate scholar a prior sound knowledge of all other sciences. Are there many such scholars even in the whole of Europe, let alone in Russia? Perhaps 20 or 30. And those 20 or 30 scholars are to govern the entire world. Can you imagine a despotism more preposterous or abominable than that? In the first place, those 30 scholars will most likely quarrel among themselves, and if they do unite it will be to the detriment of all mankind. By his very nature a scholar is disposed to intellectual and moral depravity of every kind, but his principal vice is to exalt his own knowledge and intellect and scorn all the ignorant. Let him govern, and he will become the most unbearable tyrant, for scholarly pride is repulsive, offensive, and more oppressive than any other. To be the slaves of pedants, what a fate for mankind! Give them free rein, and they will start performing the same experiments on human society that for the sake of science they now perform on rabbits, cats, and dogs. We will esteem scholars according to their merits, but for the salvation of their intellect and morality they must not be given any social privileges or afforded any other way than the common one of freedom to propagate their convictions, ideas, and knowledge. Power should no more be given to them than to anyone else, for anyone who is invested with power by an invariable social law will inevitably become the oppressor and exploiter of society. It will be said that science will not always be the property of only a few people. The time will come when it will be accessible to each and every individual. Well, that time is still far off, and a great many social upheavals will have to be carried out before it begins. Until it does, who will consent to put his fate in the hands of scholars, in the hands of priests of science? Why bother, then, to wrest it from the hands of Christian priests? It seems to us that anyone who imagines that after the social revolution all will be equally learned is profoundly mistaken. Science as such, then as now, will remain one of the numerous social specializations, the sole difference being that one's classes have been abolished. This specialization, which is accessible today only to members of the privileged classes, will become accessible to any individual with the vocation and desire to devote himself to it, though not at the expense of general manual labor, which will be obligatory for everyone. Only general scientific education will become common property, particularly a familiarity with scientific method as a way of thinking, that is, of generalizing facts and drawing more or less correct conclusions from them. But there will always be very few encyclopedic minds, and, therefore, learned sociologists. Woe to mankind if thought ever became the source and sole guide of life, if science and learning began to govern society. Life would dry up, and human society would be turned into a dumb and servile herd. The government of life by science would have no other result than to turn all mankind into fools. We revolutionary anarchists are proponents of universal popular education, liberation, and the broad development of social life, and hence are enemies of the state and of any form of statehood. By contrast to all metaphysicians, positivists, and scholarly or unscholarly worshippers of the god of science, we maintain that natural social life always precedes thought, which is merely one of its functions, but is never its result. Life develops out of its own inexhaustible depth by means of a succession of diverse facts, not a succession of abstract reflections. The latter, always produced by life but never producing it, like milestones merely indicate its direction and the different phases of its spontaneous and self-generated development. In keeping with this conviction, we have neither the intention nor the wish to start to lose our own people or on any other ideal social organization that we have drawn from post-war thought of our own. In the belief that the masses bear all the elements of their future organization of more or less historically evolved instincts, in their everyday needs and their conscious and unconscious desires, we seek a deal with the people themselves. Since every state power, every government, by its nature or by its position stands outside the people and above them, and must invariably try to subject their joys and justice which are new to them, we declare ourselves the enemies convictions of social revolutionaries, and for them we are called advocates. We do not object to this term because we are in fact the enemies of all power, knowing that power corrupts and is invested with just as much as those compelled to submit to it. Under its pernicious influence, the form become malicious and avaricious exploiters of society for their own personal or class advantage, and the latter become slaves. Idealists of every stripe, metaphysicians, positivists, defenders of the predominance of science over life, indoctrinated revolutionaries, all of them unethical are the different arguments that hold the idea of the state power. With perfect logic, in their own terms, they regard it as the sole salvation of society. I say with perfect logic because once they have adopted a position, utterly false, in our view, that thought precedes life, that abstract theory precedes social practice, and that sociology must therefore be the point of departure for social upheavals and reconstructions. They necessarily include in thought, theory, and science, at least for the present, are the property of every individual. This must be the directors of social life. We must be not only the instigators but the managers of all popular movements, and on the mark of revolution a new social organization must be created not by the communion of popular associations, communes, districts, and provinces from below upward, in conformity with popular needs and instincts, but solely by means of the dictatorial power of this learned minority, which supposedly expresses the will of all the people. Both the theory of the state and the theory of so-called revolutionary dictatorship are based on fiction assuming popular representation, which in actual fact means the government of the masses by an insignificant handful of privileged individuals, elected, or even not elected, by mobs of people around it. For voting and never knowing what or whom they are voting for, on this imaginary and abstract expression of the imaginary thought and will of all the people, of which the willing people do not have the faintest idea. The only difference between revolutionary dictatorship and the state is in external appearances. Essentially, they both represent the same government of the majority by a minority, and they have the presumed stupidity of the one and the presumed intelligence of the other. Therefore, they are equally reactionary, both having the direct and inevitable result of consolidating the political and economic privileges of the governing minority and the political and economic slavery of the masses. Now it is clear why the doctrine of revolutionaries, who is objected against to the wisdom governments or regimes that illustrate their own dictatorship on millions, have never been enemies of the state. On the contrary, they have always been and will always be its most ardent defenders. They are enemies only of existing governments, because they want to take their place. They are enemies of existing political institutions because these preclude the possibility of their own dictatorship. At the same time, however, they are the most impassioned friends of state power, for were it not retained the
I've gotta take a break.
having liberated the masses in earnest,
Just
would
too
eliminate
sleepy.
the pseudo-revolutionary minority's
Sorry.
hope of putting a new harness
But
on
any
it
of that,
and conferring
I'm gonna try to get back on
blessings
when I
of
can.
their own governmental measures.
Maybe in
This
an
is
hour
so
or
true
45
that even
minutes.
now we see the doctrine of revolutionaries under Marxist leadership everywhere taking the side of the state and its supporters against popular revolution at a time when reaction is